Over the next few weeks, we are going to begin examining some of the necessary skills that you need in order to be successful on the reading TABE test. We're going to begin by learning how to identify and use supporting details within various types of reading passages. To kick us off, we're going to start by learning how to use details to support inferences. Before we get started with an example, let's refresh a little bit and define some of the terms that we need to know in order to effectively identify supporting details and understand what we mean when we say that we are using details to support inferences. So to start off with, we need to remember that, for example, in literary texts, the authors are not always going to tell you everything. You know, they may suggest events, settings, or even character traits through the story's details. So basically what that means is when you're reading a literary text, they may not tell you specifically that the story is set in New York City. But they may provide details by talking about things that would lead the reader to know that the story is set in New York City. For example, if you talk about attending a Broadway play and then going to Central Park, well, where are those located? Broadway, Central Park, you automatically think New York City. So an inference is what we make when we take those details and come to a conclusion or make an educated guess, which is what an inference is, about what happens and why, where the story is set, the character traits that are possessed by the characters within the story. So when you make an inference, you're going to use your background knowledge about people and other stories, as well as your knowledge of the world, to interpret the story's details. So, an inference, just to be clear with our definitions, inferences are educated guesses, okay? And to make an inference, you use background knowledge as well as your own personal experiences. So facts that you know and things you have experienced will help you to make an inference or an educated guess about what is going on. For your inference to hold water, for it to make sense, you have to make sure that it is based on specific details. So if you make an inference, you have to have the details to back it up. These specific details are what are known as evidence. So, when you make an inference, you're in essence being a reading detective. For a detective to draw a conclusion or state, this is specifically what is going on, this is what has happened, they have to gather evidence to support the claim that they are making. So how do we apply this in a literary text? Well, let's take a look at an example. So we're told we have a story called New Distractions. And our example says, based on the 6th, 7th, and 8th paragraphs, how does Madeline feel during the drive to the beach house? Okay, so we're not going to read the whole story. We're just, for the purpose of this example, going to look specifically at the 6th, 7th, and 8th paragraphs. Okay, so our question says, based on the 6th, 7th, and 8th paragraphs, how does Madeline feel during the drive to the beach house? Okay, let's begin with paragraph 6. The drive to the beach house took most of the day. As they turned off the highway onto country back roads, the clouds darkened. Rain fell in hard spurts. Near the coastline, fog floated through the cypress trees and over the rain-drenched sand. Sitting in the back seat, Madeline watched her reflection in the window. Behind Madeline's reflection, the trees and sand dunes slipped past. Even more beautiful in the rain, her mother said. Turning, she asked, "What do you think, Madeline?" Madeline glared at her mom. "Beautiful," she muttered. So, based on the 6th, 7th, and 8th paragraphs, how does Madeline feel about the drive to the beach house? Well, let's look at our answer choices. Tired, enthusiastic, or bitter? Well, what details in the passage would help us make a decision on how she feels? Well, when we look at these 6th, 7th, and 8th paragraphs, it's going to tell us that Madeline feels bitter about her parents' decision to leave their phones behind. Okay, so earlier in the passage, before they left for vacation, they were told that they were going to leave their phones because they wanted to enjoy the trip to the beach. This was a time to get away from technology and relax. But let's see what's going on. So we know that Madeline is watching her reflection in the window, sitting in the back seat. Now her mother talks about how beautiful the sight is. But what is Madeline's reaction? Well, she said it was beautiful, but we're told that she mutters the statement that it was beautiful. Okay, what does mutter mean? Well, if you mutter something, you're kind of saying it lower under your breath or slurring and mumbling the words. So her reaction was beautiful. So if you're on your way to the beach, are you going to respond that it's beautiful? If you're enthusiastic, are you going to respond that something is beautiful? If you're kind of bitter about something. In this case, the clues, the evidence that we have points to the fact that Madeline is quite bitter. Even though they're going to the beach, she's not really happy about the circumstance that she's in. Let's work through a couple of examples and practice identifying details in a story to support an inference. In this case, we're going to be analyzing literary texts as we apply our practice. Now, one tip that is important to know when you are TABE testing is before you read the passage, the very first thing you should do is read the questions and the answers, because it may help you as you're reading identify what you're looking for as you read. In some cases, the questions may tell you to read a specific paragraph. Now, I'm not telling you to skip reading the entire story. You do need to read the entire passage in order to get the full context. But it is a good idea, especially to look at those questions and look at your answer choices so that you are able to identify those as you read. So our first question is based on the first paragraph. When does the story take place? So does it take place in the future, in the present, or in the past? So let's take a look at the first paragraph and see if we can determine when the story is set. Our passage is called Brave Changes. The new fire engine was a true beauty. The firefighters and I stood in a silent semicircle as my father, the captain, climbed into the driver's seat. We had been waiting months for this. Still, as I gazed at the gleaming Model T, I couldn't help feeling a little nostalgic for the old days. The station's fire horses had been the fastest and strongest in Boston. I was going to miss them. I was pretty sure the firefighters were already missing them. It's not easy to watch the world change under your feet. So let's look at some clues in the passage to see if we can determine when this story takes place. Well, the first thing that stands out is the phrase gleaming Model T. What is the Model T? Well, if you've studied any kind of history, I'm sure you have heard of Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company. Henry Ford is famous for inventing what is known as the assembly line. He invented the ideas, came up with the ideas on how to assemble, in this case, cars quickly and efficiently by having people focus on one specific job and doing that job well. He's also the inventor of the Model T. Okay, the Model T was the first fully operational motor car. All right, so as I glazed at the gleaming Model T, so gleaming gives us a clue of being new. So in this case, this is a brand new Model T. Well, then we're told that we're feeling a little nostalgic for the old days. So what happened in the old days? The station's fire horses. So it looks like in this story, the fire station is replacing their fire horses with brand new Model Ts. So, based on this information, does the story take place in the future, the present, or the past? Well, we know Model T occurred in the past, therefore the story takes place in the past. As a follow-up question, we are asked, which quote from the story best supports the idea that the story takes place in the past? So the fire engine was a true beauty. The station's fire horses have been the fastest and strongest in Boston. Or I was going to miss them. I was pretty sure the firefighters were already missing them. Well, we touched on this in the first paragraph and in the first question that we looked at when we determined it took place in the past. The station's fire horses had been the fastest and strongest in Boston. Are fire horses still used today? No, they were used in the past. Therefore, that statement best supports our inference, or best supports our claim that this story takes place in the past.